Warning, the following video contains spoilers for the brand new quest In the Eternal Fire's Shadow in The Witcher 3 Complete Edition. If you have any intention of experiencing the only fresh piece of Witcher content we're liable to see for a good few years, then I strongly suggest you go and play through this quest for yourself. It's fantastic quality storytelling as usual from CD Projekt Red, and I wouldn't want to deprive you of the twists, turns, and surprises that lay in store along the way. Come back here when you're done, and we'll jump straight into the lore surrounding this brand new monster. The world of The Witcher is home to all manner of malevolent spectres, from tormented noonwraiths jilted and killed on their wedding day to tortured plague maidens, long made to suffer by painful afflictions and now forced to roam the earth, spreading their disease. Indeed, it appears most spectres in this world are born of powerful negative emotions. Torment, pain, and suffering are all rife breeding grounds for such things, and the Red Miasmal is no exception to this rule. What sets it apart from others, however, according to the Witcher bestiary, is, quote, a miasmal, by contrast, is considered an evil force born from the concentrated collective suffering of plague victims. It has the ability to possess human bodies, thus granting it corporeal form and a means to wreak havoc. End quote. Indeed, rather than serving as the tormented spirit of just one individual, the Red Miasmal appears created by an amalgam of sorts, a consciousness arisen from the collective suffering of many. A hive mind, then? Perhaps, and there is evidence to suggest such. In order to explore this mystery further, let's play through our one and only case study involving a Red Miasmal, that being the brand new quest in The Witcher 3 Complete Edition. Our journey begins just outside the Devil's Pit in Velen, a large but seemingly abandoned mine atop which stands a deacon of the Eternal Fire begging for help. He claims he needs to stop the source of a plague buried deep within the Devil's Pit, supposedly housed within a salt chamber. Let's have a listen and see what he has to say about this mysterious entity.
Deep within the mine lies a salt cavern haunted. Someone, that is something, lurks there, so ancient records show. A spirit that breeds pestilence and whispers in the dark.
Could be this calls for a witcher, but I'll need more to go on. This spirit, been in the mine long? Anyone actually seen it?
I've seen but some of the records. Above my station, you see. As I recall, it appeared long past, after the first plague victims were brought here. Our wards recently reported hearing whispers in the night. Pleas for mercy, but ghostly, strange. Altogether frightening. I'm afraid that's all I know.
Interesting. Notice how the deacon talks of ancient records, not just old, but ancient. Just how long has this thing been down there, and how powerful can it be as a result? He speaks of this thing breeding pestilence, yet also mentions how it only appeared after the first plague victims were brought to the pit. Well, there's only one way to learn more, by making, or I guess fighting our way down to the mine entrance. Upon the doorframe lies some interesting text. Translated from game text, it reads, "This Polish word," which I won't try to pronounce, but in English means simply danger. We shall proceed with caution, it seems, as we go.
Into the mines!
Once inside the entrance chamber, one of the very first encounters we come across is a note from somebody called Reinald, warning of strange creatures lurking in Devil's Pit Mine, though he does not, for the time being at least, know what they are. However, one could argue that from a certain point of view, his description of, quote, a manifestation of concentrated suffering, end quote, pretty well hits the nail on the head. Speaking of, he warns in particular of those pierced by nails, citing them as particularly aggressive, symptoms of a blood fever, he ponders, before finally settling on the theory that these beings are indeed possessed by, quote, something that twisted his form, and then, for reasons unknown, departed, end quote. Let's press on a little further, see what else we can find. At the end of the same chamber lies a seemingly bricked off passageway. No way of getting down there, not even Ard will break down this one. Curious why segments of a mine shaft should be bricked off. Were the previous inhabitants of this mine trying to keep raiders out? I mean, possibly. After all, we know this mine was used to dump countless plague victims, and as I'm sure we all know by now, it's important to keep infected people isolated from others. Yet, the bulk of the mine is still accessible, and it's only this little area that's bricked off. Surely it couldn't be decorative, right? We'll pick this back up in a bit, let's keep going. On the next door is pinned yet another letter from Reinald, clearly intended to be read before going through this door. The contents of this one explain that Reinald has contracted something. Now, that's weird, because Reinald is a Witcher, and Witcher mutagens are supposed to make them immune to all disease. Reinald himself can't believe it either, citing this to be impossible. He also mentions brewing up a potion in an attempt to counteract some of the effects. Seems that the ingredients for that are stored away further in the mine, according to the letter. Curious. What could possibly have the power to turn a Witcher ill? Is Geralt at risk of harm from this creature too?
Please, help me.
Sounds sincere enough. Can't be too sure though. Could be a trap.
Please help me. Interesting. An ancient pit afflicted with unknown illness, connected to the very first plague victims to be sent here. It's powerful enough to infect a Witcher, somebody is crying for help, and what's being bricked off? Well, Kirametz's lamp can illuminate our next clue, and we can confirm that this mine is indeed home to some form of spirits, clearly human and seemingly reliving events from when they were alive.
Not that way. Won't find me there.
That cough screams plague victim, and that voice. There it is again, showing an eagerness to be found, an irritation at us going the wrong way even, and hold on. How can it see us?
Dark energy emanating from these bones. Spectres doing?
Geralt's Witcher knowledge tells us that these bones are imbued with dark energy, and that this cavern is indeed likely home to some form of spectre. Indeed, the events following continue to suggest both a spectral power and presence is with us. Torches light as we walk past, barrels are thrown in frustration, and all the while, something appears constantly aware of our location. We come to our first direct encounter, a human, plague victim looks like, reduced down to crawling, with torn flesh and an emanating red hue. Though no sooner than we've seen it, does it disintegrate into a pile of maggots. Ugh. More bricks, and now some strange glowing roots as well. The same glow as we just saw on the plague victim. The corridor forks here and we're left with two choices. Whilst the voice appears eager for us to turn right, I'm not so sure. Their eagerness almost gives rise to suspicion, and with all this talk of possessed beings, it can't hurt to pursue the left passage for now, can it? More of those glowing roots are cropping up everywhere now, as well as further encounters with the mysterious plague victims. More questions right now than answers, it seems. Aha, a third letter from Reinald, this time a little more disjointed and confused than before. Sealed in the mine alongside the plague victims, it appears Reinald is losing his mind, citing to have gaping holes in his memory. It appears whatever's infected him is now gaining control over the man's thoughts, as well as just his body. The next chamber will allow us to answer one thing at least, as Kira's lamp depicts a replay of spirits bricking up yet another of these mysterious walls. And this one appears weak. 1 hour later, and we're face to face with the horrific scene within. These bricked up areas weren't for decoration, it seems, oh no, but rather a way to seal off plague victims from the outside world. Hell, even just the rest of the mine. Masses of infected people all crammed in and forced to suffer in one tiny space. Some are even glowing with that same red miasma we keep seeing scattered about the mine. This tiny chamber alone must house at least 50 skeletons, and as we'd soon find out, it was just one of a great many more. Just how many people had been sealed in down here? Hundreds? Thousands? Whatever the number, it appears such heavily concentrated suffering bred so much more than just disease. All those collective feelings of pain and torment melded together to form a consciousness entirely of its own, a being made up of disease and suffering.
Got a bad feeling about this. Who are you?
Interesting. It appears that some of the plague victims disintegrate back into the same glowing skeletons we saw bricked off. There's no doubt now that these plague victims, they're extensions of something greater, something far more powerful. No doubt they're connected to that pleading voice somehow. Our fourth letter from Reinald, much shorter than the others and now barely coherent. It reads, quote, "Something inside me, no signs of leaving. Can hardly write. Won't let me. Going to die here, all alone. If you don't find me." End quote. So it seems the power this thing has over the other Witcher has grown to the extent that he can control the man's very actions. Not entirely, that much is evident from the existence of this letter, but it's clear that Reinald struggled to write this. A Witcher of great physical and mental resilience being brought to his knees by this unknown spectre. We land in an open chamber of sorts to be greeted by yet more plague victims, only this time they're openly hostile.
Leave them. You're wasting time. You're here to find me. Me.
As we dispatch them with relative ease here, the mysterious voice appears yet more frustrated. Well then, perhaps it doesn't have control over these things, else it wouldn't have them attack us due to it wasting time? Though perhaps that's what it wants us to believe. Either way, it's time we got to the bottom of this, and Reinald's old chambers may just have the answers we're looking for. Aha, yes, another letter. An older one, it seems, judging from the coherency of the text. Indeed, this one gives us many more answers. Reinald was indeed locked in the mine, by frightened priests of the Eternal Fire no less, and he was indeed possessed. Quote, "The spectre has fully fused into my body. Not even Quen has an effect. If only I had the right ingredients, I could brew my filter, intensify my signs, and expel the filth with a combination of Illidan and Ard." End quote. He goes on to talk about how the potion is key to defeating this creature, explaining that the ingredients must be right and cannot be substituted, else, quote, "the Red Miasmal will possess you too." Strange. Miasmal. What is that? How do I know it? End quote. Indeed, since this letter was written before some of the others we read, it's clear that this Red Miasmal needed time to possess Reinald, with the effects and level of control being a gradually building thing. We don't know whether it took days, weeks, or even months to gain full control. What we can infer from this, though, is that there was some level of back and forth. Reinald could read the Miasmal's thoughts as well. After all, he's evidently confused at knowing the thing's name. It was a knowledge that came from within, and knowledge from the Miasmal itself. Indeed, this brings us on to a greater point of analysis for Red Miasmals in general, and that's the fact that this thing knew its own name. Prior to this moment, I've believed that the Red Miasmal was an entity bred entirely from collective suffering, and should have no external knowledge of the outside world, and by extension more of its kind. But Geralt's seeming knowledge of the Red Miasmals as a species suggests that more of them do exist. If more Red Miasmals exist and are known by the same name, how then did this Miasmal come to be aware of that knowledge? It clearly wasn't from Reinald. Well, there's no specific confirmation. After all, this is a brand new creature to the Witcher universe, and no further references to it exist outside of this quest. But I have a working theory, which I'll get right into after we deal with the thing itself. After leaving Reinald's quarters and following a few more corridors, we discover his fifth and final letter, explaining that his last action was to imprison himself and the Miasmal within the Salt Caves. He also confirms the creature's origins, quote, "darkness, blood, corpses fresh and fetid, air thick with plague, concentrated suffering created spectre, pestilence, pain, a Red Miasmal." End quote. A spectre created out of pestilence and pain? How is that possible? Perhaps we'll learn more by facing down this mysterious creature. We finally come to a large salt chamber, and there, at the end, trapped within salt stalagmites, is our ancient Witcher Reinald. One Ard on the stalagmites later, and he's finally free, but not all is as it seems. Reinald explains that knowing he'd been possessed by the Red Miasmal, he trapped himself within the salt chamber in order to prevent neither the creature nor himself from escaping. He wants the potion, explaining that it will dispel the Miasmal and free him. But we're not stupid. Knowing full well Reinald has been trapped down here for years, the only way he can still possibly be alive is from the Miasmal sustaining his body long past its sell-by date. Something's up here. And a quick lie about Reinald venturing into the mine with Lambert originally, of all people, proves as much. Reinald doesn't deny the story, hell, he confirms it even, and that tells us all we need to know, because the whole time he was possessed by the Miasmal. Who saw that coming? Denying him the potion gives the real Reinald a chance to break free, telling us what we should really do.
No! Destroy it! Drink the potion! Finish what I started!
Drinking the potion, we fight against the possessed Reinald, finally trapping him with Illidan and casting the Miasmal from his body with Ard. This triggers a second fight, this time with the Miasmal itself, in its final form. A tall figure, constructed of twisted and contorted flesh, with long and dangerous looking talons, pus-filled buboes and protruding, fleshy whatever these things are. It's a creature entirely devoid of the symmetry of nature, and I don't doubt that this body is but a rudimentary construction devised by the parasitic consciousness housed within. Its attacks are comprised of talon swings, fire summoning, dematerializing and rematerializing at will, as well as summoning plague victims. With the Miasmal finally defeated, Reinald's body is free, with Geralt claiming he died centuries ago, but was maintained by the Miasmal. A further talk with the Witch's ghost can tell us more.
When exactly did you arrive here in this mine?
That was 900
70... or no, 80. I can't recall. Damn memories are foggy. Fractured.
Reinald, that's more than 300 years past.
300? No. No! They'd have sent another to find me after 5, 10 at most. Osmond himself would have come. Shit.
I'm sorry.
What's more, we also get some elaboration on just why it chose to possess a Witcher out of everyone.
Miasmal got lucky you showed, not some mere mortal. Witcher's immunity meant it could possess you without destroying your body.
A cruel irony. I had to focus all my strength to prevent it from escaping. Till I locked us in this prison assault, that is. Before that, it possessed the sick. Quickly corrupted. Deformed them. Turned them into the undying dead. Feral and mindless.
All those voices, torches, wasn't you, was it?
You gotta ask. The Miasmal aimed to lure you here. I was too weak to even notice your presence. At least at first.
And that's just about everything we learn of the Red Miasmal during this quest. So now, let's break down. What exactly is this creature, and where might it have come from? For starters, let's look back at these glowing roots, which protrude from all across the mine. As far as I can tell, this is an extension of the Red Miasmal itself, and is how it was able to cast its influence throughout the entire mine, utilising basic incendiary magic, telepathy, and telekinesis to a more efficient and ranged degree. By having an entire network to cast from, it's like setting up those booster discs all over your house, boosting the overall range of the central source. I see an obvious comparison to be made between the Red Miasmal and the Mind Flayer from Stranger Things, with both being a somewhat central consciousness capable of puppeteering a number of other beings under its influence. But where Vecna is the consciousness behind the Mind Flayer, the Red Miasmal appears to generate its own consciousness. Now, whilst I fully believe that the Red Miasmal developed out of the collective suffering of the many entombed plague victims down in the mine, I'd just like to reiterate my point about the creature knowing what it was, and Geralt confirming there are indeed more of its kind in the world. Indeed, I don't believe the Red Miasmal comes from mass suffering alone. Whilst it does require such conditions to thrive, I believe an aspect of it permeates throughout the world, a spore perhaps, or more likely some form of unclassified parasite of a spectral nature. When it lands in an ideal environment, i.e. a concentrated and sealed off cave of suffering plague victims all dying in horrific conditions, it is then able to spread and grow, laying down roots and developing into something powerful enough to possess the sick, and eventually even a Witcher. Its fuel of suffering gives rise to a being of greater sentience than before, complex enough to understand other beings, their varying qualities, and above all, reflect on its own existence. It's something like the Grave Mind from Halo in this regard. Unfortunately, just like any other parasite, it's unable to infect hosts without quickly wearing down their bodies and destroying them in the process, until when chance came. The Red Miasmal ensnared a new bearer. It came to the Witcher Reinald, who took it deep into the tunnels of the Devil's Pit salt caves, and there it consumed him. The Miasmal brought to Reinald unnatural long life. For 300 years it poisoned his mind, and in the gloom of the salt cave, it waited. Darkness crept back into the plains of Velen. Rumour grew in the priesthood of the Eternal Fire, whispers of a nameless fear. And the Red Miasmal perceived its time had now come. So let's look at how it was able to sustain itself for hundreds of years. After all, whilst multiple droves of plague victims were sent down into the Devil's Pit over this time, there must have been at least a couple hundred years across the board where the Red Miasmal was devoid of victims. And that's where I have a theory as to what exactly this creature feeds on, because I don't believe it to be flesh or any traditional nutrients of the kind. Indeed, flesh appears more as a means for which it may interact with the physical realm. As the bestiary states, the Red Miasmal appears in places of mass, suffering. Indeed, I believe this is a creature which feeds off of suffering, or pain, or general negative emotions. It most likely comes from another sphere, and I do believe that the Red Miasmal is some kind of incorporeal parasite, only able to grow to such strengths within an all-you-can-eat buffet of suffering. As a further stretch, I think its long-term sustenance has been further fueled by all the trapped spirits we see along the way with Kira's lamp. Maintained in perpetual misery, they serve as an everlasting drip feed for the Red Miasmal, through which it is able to sustain itself and Reinald within those salt stalagmites for hundreds of years. Furthermore, the form it seems to take on, of a plague-stricken creature ravaging the lands and infecting more people, is not done out of a need for the disease to survive, but through a desire to inflict more suffering to people and thus provide sustenance for the spectral being of the Red Miasmal. Indeed, if Geralt hadn't defeated the thing, he himself would have become an undying vessel of power for the creature and led the hordes of plague-stricken Undying on a rampage across Velen to feed off more suffering and only grow in power further. That is, until someone like Yennefer comes along and probably mercifully puts down her ex-lover's possessed body and legions of infected plague warriors. That being said, Velen is a pretty suffering place already, and a small wandering around for the Red Miasmal would probably pretty quickly triple or quadruple its power, so who knows? But what can we learn from this quest? What does this success of the Red Miasmal have to say about us as humans? After all, if the Eternal Fire hadn't locked away all of their infected to suffer underground and away from society, the Red Miasmal would never have had the power to develop into a cunning and sentient being in the first place. Perhaps if society had shown a little more compassion for those among them suffering, maybe shut them in a room in the house and communicated via megascope until they either die or recover, maybe that would have worked better. And I mean, sure, it's a difficult one. As the Deacon of the Eternal Fire points out, they'd likely have died anyway, and not shutting them away meant more people would likely have been infected. So where do we draw the line? Well, if you ask me, trapping people down underground and bricking 50 or so at a time off into tiny little potentially airtight chambers is pretty frickin' far beyond the mark, to be honest, and it isn't hard to imagine a better prospect. Perhaps construct some houses of healing just outside the city walls, or construct a large ship which sits just off from the docks. Send sick people there, give them medicine, protect the healthcare staff with masks and those big bird things, and hope to save as many as you can. But this, what the Eternal Fire did here, the lack of dignity, the neglect, the inhumanity which these people were subjected to, that is what created the breeding ground. That is what gave rise to this monster. And so, after 6 years of waiting for new content, CD Projekt Red have done it again. Treated us to their classic helping of a moral tale where it turns out the biggest monster of them all was in fact human beings all along. Thank you very much for watching. Now, I'm aware that a large proportion of the video was going over a quest which you may or may not have just played, but I hope that I flagged up some details you may have missed, connected some story elements which you may not have noticed, and ultimately, I just hope you enjoyed this dive into what exactly the Red Miasmal is. I think it's a really cool addition to the bestiary, and I hope to see it again in future Witcher installments. So let me know what you think of the new quest and new update in general down in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, then let me know by leaving a thumbs up. I'd love to dive more into the world of The Witcher for future videos, looking into the lore of other creatures in this fantastically fleshed out world. However, I'm aware that tons of channels have already covered much of The Witcher lore, so I'll need to go away and research what hasn't been done yet, if anything. In the meantime, my channel is brimming with fresh cyberpunk content for the time being, and I have no shortage of that. If any of this sounds interesting to you, then please smash that subscribe button and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you all so much again for watching. I'm Sam Bram, and I'll see you in another video.